So general objectives. Again, if you look at these general objectives, more derived from Article 8 of Human Rights, and they were part of Data Protection Act 1998, protection of natural person, fundamental rights and freedom, rights to the protection of personal data, freedom, security and justice, economic and social progress, well-being of an individual. I mean, when I see all this, this is nothing new. We all know that these rights has to be upheld by most of the organizations. So what's GDPR present? And that's why I said in my synopsis as well that what is new in GDPR? What element from a personal data point of view is new? Yes, there are few rights which are changed, but fundamentally, if you look at the objectives, it's still the same as what any human being on earth wants, so about its personal data, or at least from an EU or UK perspective. And then I further drilled down and looked at what it says around the principles. And again, principles is very high level when I look at it. And some of the places I just put as underlined there, like personal data shall be obtained for one or more specified purpose. And why we are collecting it, we have to ask this question to ourselves: specified purpose. Is there any specified purpose we are collecting it? Further down the line, personal data shall be adequate, relevant, and not excessive in relation to processing questions. Personal data shall be accurate and up to date. Personal data shall not be kept for longer than is necessary. Again, all these are principles, and how you will implement, that's completely up to the organization itself. For example, in specified purpose, adequate, it could differentiate from one sector to another and one organization to another. Banks are, I've seen financial institutions are more heavily regulated by FCA, so they do consider that option. But again, the other organization I worked in automobile sector, in transport businesses, and in my past I've seen different level of risk with different types of data. So making it binary, I think these are just principles, very high level, and as an organization, if anyone just put this as part of their own vision and goal, they can drive something out of that and make it more binary and make it more black and white. It's 8 principles which I've always worked on. Again, personal data shall be processed in accordance with the right of data subjects. And this is quite interesting. Appropriate technical and organizational measures shall be undertaken against accidental loss or destruction of or damage to personal data. Now, what does appropriate means? What does appropriate means to any organization? Very high level. If you look at it, principles, very high level. So fundamentally, when I see any organization working in the GDPR space, they start looking into the IT and they start looking into where personal data is. But fundamentally, what is appropriate? They don't define that, what is appropriate based on their own sector and where they do the business. What is appropriate for them? So if I look at some of the advertising agencies or news sector, that's their business. They sell news and they sell information. So what is appropriate when we look at the personal data? Is it just to the letter or what? So with the banks I have worked, I try to make these as binary as possible so I can apply some controls on it and make it more look relevant for that organization. Personal data shall not be transferred outside of the European Economic Area unless certain protections are in place. And again, this unless certain protection. And these days I see a lot of organizations going on the cloud. There are few which are quite renowned, AWS, Azure, I'm sure you all must have heard about it. And they keep the data in different part of the world, in Australia, in other part of the world. So what is area unless certain protection means? Is it Article 29 of the GDPR working party which says something about it? That needs to be looked at it by any organization, especially when you're going to cloud. And I think most of companies look into the cloud. Has IT become a commodity trade now? So yes, why not? It's cheap, go up there. But that due diligence where that data is getting stored is very, very important, and what sort of protection they have against that data. So just put these points across just to have your brain thinking around what is meant for your organization. It's not just buying a tool and implementing that tool will resolve the problem. Identify what the issue is, what the problems are, and then work around that. And this is my favorite bit, stick and teeth. So over the years, I've tried my best to implement the controls based on information security and try to protect the data, not just personal data, but I work in that space, so it could be intellectual property, it could be different. But here, for the sake of GDPR, we just look into the personal data side of it. And again, I go back to Data Protection Act 1998. It was always there, but why we are in such a mess now that we don't know where the personal data is stored and how it's getting processed, who has got access to that. So I use that stick and teeth as saying that governance is needed, and sometimes governance requires some stick and some requires some teeth to make it happen. And with working with executives and with the other board members, 4 million or 2 million, or sorry, 10 million and 20 million euros or 2% or 4% is it's quite a good thing to have there, and especially the data breach is going around these days. I use this as a tool to push the agenda of information security for the PII, for the personal identifiable information, and then try to see if I can go beyond. Now, this 2 million or 4 million is quite interesting. Again, it's been derived from Article 8 of Human Rights from EU law, and it's around 2% is more around personal identifiable information, and 4% is could be your consent, or if you have a consent and you haven't processed the data accordingly, that could be 4%. Or if there is a sensitive information, and they have devised and they have given a clear definition of what is sensitive. So there could be data like political affiliation, religious ethnicity, things which, if leaked out by or being breached and go out in the wild, can give a harm to a person where it's not reversible. And it can happen. So if certain group of people in some community and their beliefs or their ethnicity has gone out, it can be used against them, and Article 8 describes that it's irreversible. So that's why it's classed as sensitive data. Whereas if I see financial information, that still doesn't class as sensitive data, so it's still 2%. Or so when I was in Metro Bank, it was the first bank which introduces a salvation which says Mr., Mrs., and they have got a thing which called MX. And MX means any other apart from Mr. and Mrs. LGBT community can use that. And it just rings a bell that, oh, this could go into 4%, because if this data is leaked out just by the title, you are breaching and you might be coming under that 4% or 20 million euro fine. So be careful what you're collecting. If it's not needed, and I would recommend to go and read that sensitive piece of information, that what exactly is sensitive, and if it's not needed, if it's not lawful to do your business, then just don't collect, because there are concepts like data minimization, purpose limitation. So use those concepts to see upfront with your business processes wherever you are collecting PII, personally identifiable information, that you might not need that to do your business. It can be devastating. Personal data, if it's lost, there's a lot of reputational damage, and also there is the risk of financial. So recently I was reading a news on 8th of September about Equifax. Do you know about Equifax? Yeah, again, I don't know, 143 million again. So imagine if this happens in today's world when GDPR is live and active, this will come out. Stick and teeth will come out. And ICO, I know, is short of resources, but they will get those resources if the heavy fines are involved, and they can collect some good money out of the people. Look after your tail, and often I've seen these different regulatory programs when people are working. I always say it's a big beast which you need to fix. However, you might have new projects going in, and concepts like data minimization, concepts like purpose limitation, consent, subject access requests, which could be asked upfront in the projects, could be used. And I always say that, yeah, look after your tail and don't allow that to grow. So yeah, you're working on the beast to fix whatever it is as a repository. However, whatever is new going in, try to put those concepts in there, try to put those processes in there. For example, privacy impact analysis, you can do that upfront wherever your business process is, which is collecting personal data. Record of processing activities, I think it's Article 30, which says about record of processing activity. And when I see that is, again, it's just a business process. If you know your processes and if you've documented your processes, this shouldn't be coming out, and you should know where the data is flowing from business to IT and which system and which components are holding that data. Data minimization, purpose limitation, again, consent, default out as opt, wherever your websites, digital medium, wherever you're using opt-in option, just try to go back and look at it and see, do you need to change this as a default opt-out and make it clear for any customer, consumer, or your employees to be very clear what they are signing up to. Subject access request, again, this is data rectification and right to be forgotten and all that kind of thing. Subject access request, I think it's 30 days, what they talk about now, when the request is made. And imagine if this is start coming in bulk, what will happen? And the fines are, again, when I was looking at it, I said, okay, maybe the fines will go through the ICO, but if anybody in the law business here directly might be very, very happy to start using that as a damage and accidental loss and start coming out with all these claims. So yeah, upfront subject access request, try to look at it wherever your processes are capturing personal data to see if this can be fixed upfront, quick fix. Children's data, international data repositories, encryption, and yeah, these two are very, very quite interesting because these are the two only black and white thing I find in the legislation that says encryption and pseudonymization. And with the bank when I was working there, they said, well, let's just encrypt everything and we are secure. Why we do encryption? It's just the whole point of encryption is, and the GDPR talks about breach notification. GDPR does talk about 72 hours breach. So yeah, in this day and age, I don't think that you can stop a breach. It will happen. It's inevitable. No matter what you do, it might still happen. This is just securing that breach so I can confidently say that I've encrypted my data, and if it's breached, it's still secure. It doesn't mean anything. Pseudonymization is just very confusing when you look at it. It's just two pieces of information kept separately as a personal identifiable information. My name is Junaid and my email address is something. If I can keep them separate, if they are breached separately, if you can't combine them, can't reverse engineer them, that's called pseudonymization. That's the only two technical controls I see there as very, very black and white and binary. However, is it applicable? You cannot just encrypt all the data, whatever you have. You have databases. It's just not applicable at all. It doesn't make sense. But yes, going forward, you can start looking into it. New projects going in, new hardware going in, new storage devices going in, new cloud contracts going in. Can you do some encryption on that, on the fly, on the motion, and also at rest? And again, appropriate technical control, I talk about the regulation is not presenting any black and white picture of what to implement. Identify all business processes where personal data is captured and processed. Identify all system application components where personal data is stored and processed. Again, this is all identification exercise which the organization have to go through. You might not be finished everything by 25th of May, 2018, but if you have identified everything, then you have a visibility and you might have some kind of a plan to rectify. And I working with the ICO as well, I understand that if you have a plan to fix and if you know where your data is and if you know where it's getting processed, you might be able to do it something in 6 months or 10 months time. So yeah, you identify everything before you do. Physical repositories and controls around PII data. Again, some of the appropriate controls which I think might be relevant. Access controls, your logging. I've seen horrendous kind of logging happening. People just develop something and the logs are coming up with all kinds of data. It's just the debug mode which is opened up and everything goes in. So look around the logging, privilege account management, incident management processes, asset management, DR processes, testing methodology. Anonymization is a good technique as well, application security testing, patching and vulnerability. So some of the areas which I just looked at it to say these are some of the appropriate controls which maybe most of the organization use. I just put this slide in to show how much breaches are happening, and this was the latest one, the last one, which I just, when I was finishing my presentation, I saw this and I put it. Imagine if this happens in 25th of May. It could be very devastating, and these news are very, very common. So be aware of securing that data. Opportunity for change, and again, as I said, I look at GDPR as a good way of improving information security in general, and specifically around PII data. Look at entire organization culture, and it's a cultural change, I believe, and improve how personal data is handled, develop or alter existing awareness and training exercises around information security, risk assessment scenarios around what can happen if personal data loss.
I'm going to have to cut you off there. You're 5 minutes over. I've
Apologies
exercised a bit of chair's discretion. But I do want to get on to the speakers panel.
Sure.
And
Just
for people to get off to the VIP visit.
Sure.
So can you
just
quickly close?
Just one
Thank you.
slide. Emphasize again opportunity for change. Password complexities, phishing techniques. Password should not be written down on paper. Clear desk policy. Some of the general security controls which we can all bring in around PII data and can implement in the organization and can change the culture. And that's it. Thank you very much, John.
We'll take questions in the panel.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed.